All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our Africa Talks Tech. In today's episode, we will be catching up with one of our former guests on the show. Sam, who are we going to be having a discussion with today, and what are we going to be discussing with our guest today on the show?
Kazim, you're going to have to help me out here because I want to make sure I do all the right things. So I'll describe the guest. She's really amazing, vibrant. She's got from an organization called Niger Kids, right? I know the first name is Titilope. So Kazim, can you give us her full name and pump up the title of this show? And I'll add on to this because I'm really excited about speaking to Titilope today.
Yes, exactly, Sam. Titilope's full name is Titilope Adewusi. And of course, we're going to be discussing empowering African children through accessible and engaging learning tools with her on the show today.
Excellent. Just kick back, chill out. And what I love about chatting to Titilope is she brings this amazing energy in here, and it's really learning through fun. So I know her scope is now even extended into the corporate world. And think about her as a friendly mosquito in the nicest possible way. So she won't make you itch. It won't give you malaria, but it will just leave that buzzing sound that you just want to have more of. So without much of ado, kick back, relax, and let's have another jamming session with Titilope.
Welcome to Africa Talks Tech, where we bring you conversations with tech pioneers and entrepreneurs who are shaping the future of technology in Africa. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and my name is Kazim Adegboyega. I'm based here in Nigeria. I work for Icon Systems Limited. And of course, I don't do the show alone. So I'm here with my very good friend and my partner. Over to you now, Sam.
Oh, hi, Kazim. Thanks for handing over the mic. My name is Sam Erskine. I'm based in the UK, and I'm the head of digital experience enablement for a large organization. But for the purpose of the show, I am Kazim's partner in crime in making sure that we commit the act of sharing the best of Africa rather than discussing the worst of the world. So today, Kazim, who do we have on the show and what are we going to be talking about?
Yes, today we're going to be looking at empowering African children through accessible and engaging learning tools. And we have our guest who is not new on the show, Titilope Adewusi. Welcome back to Africa Talks Tech, Titi.
Thank you, Sam and Kazim, for having me. I'm, of course, delighted to be here.
We're thrilled to have you back. But just before we get started now, for those who are not familiar with your name, right, do you mind to help us with an introduction of who you are and a bit of your background?
Okay, so my name is Titi Adewusi. I'm one of the co-founders of Niger Kit, which is an all-female led, we're always happy to say that, an all-female led edtech company. And what do? We actually just take the boring out of learning and make it fun. In simple terms, we use leverage on technology and gamification for learning. So that's us. That's us in simple terms. We develop games. We expanded to doing short stories, worksheets, and also we started with doing things for children, but we also expanded to doing a number of these things for corporates. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thank you very
All
much
right.
for that. And I suppose one of the things that we also want to share is that we actually spoke to Titilope back in, I think, 2020. So she was one of the first of the many guests we had right at the edge and in the middle of the pandemic. We reconnecting because this is really more about where are we now. So on that basis, TT, what I wanted to find out from yourself is really, can you give us a little bit of an overview of where we are now in terms of some of the most impactful educational games or learning tools that you've developed as part of um, your organization since we last connected with you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sam. Wow, it seems like yesterday we connected, but we had to go and check the records and surprised that it's 2020. That now seems so long ago. So in 2020, we were just still in the middle of the pandemic. We had developed a number of games as at that time. We had, started talking with organizations to partner with, especially to telecom operators. Then, before the pandemic, a lot of people were very reluctant. So the pandemic, I keep saying it was like a fairy godmother that waved her magic wand and turned Cinderella into a princess overnight. So that was 2020. Um, we had started focusing. Our game started with focusing on games that had to do with Africa. So we are really about trying to tell the African story, looking at games around the continent, Nigeria, destinations in Nigeria, cultures in Nigeria, things like that. But as the pandemic, pushed on, we started going more into academic games because that's what a lot of people wanted. A lot of people wanted academic games in maths and in English and science, and so we started doing a lot more of those games. We had games on, we had games on values because it's one of the things that we are promoting. So we've gone full circle. We started with primary school games, and we then moved to lower secondary school games. So more and more things were happening, and we've also done games around key push or key teams. So, for instance, this year, which is when I was talking to you about earlier on, was election for Nigeria. So we actually developed an election game. Remember that we're all about making learning fun, engaging, and effortless. So we actually had a game around the election, and they rolled it out because people needed to know, hey, this election that made all of us sit at home, what's it all about? The people in charge of the elections, about parties, about campaigns, about manifestos. So it was a fun way for children to learn. So that was one of the major ones for this year. We also promote financial literacy. So that was another big thing that happened. So promoting games that, apart from the normal maths, English, and science, which we moved into, things that go with what's happening in the environment or in that season. So the election one, I think that's been one of my proudest moments. The election games, also the games on financial literacy. That's also been been awesome for us. Maybe let me stop there.
Thank you very much. And I suppose if I hand over to Kazim to build on that, right? It's a great recap. I've got some follow-up questions, but I believe Kazim had something much more relevant to environments as well around this. So Kazim, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Titi, for that quick recap. So I want to check, Titi, your games now. Are your offerings, these games, are they solely for individuals or children that live in the urban areas? So how about children who live in the rural areas with restricted internet connectivity? Are those kids also able to take advantage of these games?
Kazim, you don't even have to go to the rural areas to talk about internet connectivity. You honestly, I'm telling you, we don't have to go to the rural areas to talk about the challenge with the internet and connectivity.
You can say that again.
It's a major challenge. So when we built the games based on having access to the internet. And that's major. It's major in Nigeria. It's major in Africa in general because internet connectivity is major. Even having internet devices is also major. But let's not go there. So it was a challenge that we were not happy about because we didn't want our games to be elitist. It's something that we wanted everyone to do, both whether you're going to private school or a public school. But then again, when you're a business, there's also that thing of balancing. There's been a social enterprise, there's been a for profit, or even just been an NGO. So we've had a lot of that battle in terms of how do we ensure that the people that need it are not just only in the urban areas. So two things that have happened. The first one was we had a major partnership with one of the major telecoms operators here in Nigeria. So what that did is that as long as you have a mobile phone, you have access to a bit of data from your mobile phone where those operators are, you can then play our games. So that was a major thing that happened in 2021. So we partnered with them. So once you have a mobile operator, you can access your phone and you can have access to a bit of data with these major telecom operators. Then you can actually play the Niger Kids game. All you just have to do is send a code to your phone and it allows you to do that. So that was one of the major things. Of course, that doesn't solve all the problems. The second thing that we did is that we decided to also do some kind of intervention, social impact intervention, and we partnered with some other companies, some other smaller tech companies to organize events. And the idea behind this event is it allows people that typically don't have access to devices, that don't have access to the internet, for us to bring that experience to them. So we partnered with some public schools. We also organized an event, where those from those schools could also come to those events. These were just some, interventions, and they are like temporary interventions. But what they did is that they allowed people to taste the pudding. And so once you taste the pudding, then there's a bit more push towards, having that access. But we are still not there. I will be honest and say that we are still not there in terms of connectivity and accessibility, and it's a major challenge. Which is one of the things that I've said I'm going to also go into advocacy in terms of both private sector and government advocacy for improving access to technology infrastructure that will allow children have access to the internet and all the tools and learning resources that come with the internet.
So one of the things that I do as a leader always get challenged about is, yes, I know you're doing A, B, and C, but can you measure it? Can you tell me what impact it's having, right? So I like to do my 1 to 3 of like, make it visible, make it repeatable, and make it measurable. Building on that, this is a space that's not always easy. So I'm interested in how, what are you using to assess the effectiveness and the impact of your gaming tools on children in the markets and environments that you work in today?
Okay. One of the things we also learn about measuring is you start with making it as simple as possible, and take it from there. So we have three main ways that we measure. The first one is also to use duration. So as simple as it is, it's also a way to see how your tools are helping. So you know that if they're really helping, the children tend to spend longer on it. So that's just a simple, the simplest of it. So you're always aiming for them to spend more, use it more. I guess that's what Facebook and all the other social media, they want us to stay longer on their games. It's really one of the easiest and the first one. I think the other is that we do pre and post assessments. So the pre and post assessment allows us to say what's the improvement that's happening in terms of the game. So this is where you were before, and where are you now in terms of those subjects. And then the last one is just the feedback. So we try to do periodic feedback, mainly with the teachers and then the students, in terms of how are they doing. Of course, that is not as quantitative, but it just gives you a general feel. So we get the feedback from the teachers, get the feedback from the students. It's like filling a survey in terms of give us how many stars, was this good, was it helpful, and so that also tells. And I think what has been most encouraging has been the feedback from the teachers or their parents or their guardians. Most people don't like to learn. I mean, unless you are a FICO student, very nerdy student. A lot of children if like to play but not like to read their books, which is why when we measure duration, it helps because you know that a typical child would not want to spend too much time, on their books as against playing. So I think that's one of the greatest feedback we get is that, oh, I'm surprised that my child is on this thing. And I say, no, I have to get to the top of this thing. I want to beat this person. So that just spending longer on it. And then the feedback that parents get to say, oh, he learned this thing from the game. Because the games are not like, classrooms. They're just quizzes that you do that people want to get the answers right, so they go back to look for the answers and they learn that way. So just some of the feedback saying, look, this is just more engaging, they like to spend time with it, and I have seen an improvement in the person's performance. So those are the things that we currently measure, and we are still gathering lots and lots of data. That's another thing, just gathering lots and lots of data to help you make better decisions.
Thank you for that. So I'll hand over back to Kazim to explore that, and I'll build a little bit more on the measures. But that's great. Kazim, where are we taking Titilope right now?
Oh, yes, I want to bring Titi back to some of what we discussed in the previous episode, the last time we had her on the show, right? We mentioned things around when you have an average African child. So when you ask them about their heroes, they are quick to say Superman, Batman. And when you even ask a regular and average African child to name 5 fruits, they are quick to jump on apple and then all of those English acronyms, right? And how about A for Agbalumo? The last time on the call. So I want to find out, I want to ask you, Titi, what are you doing to ensure that you reach out to government or the policy makers to ensure that educational tools such as yours is readily available to children across Africa?
Good question. So I think I was having that discussion earlier with Sam to say that one of the major challenges right now is actually the infrastructure. When I mean infrastructure, the connectivities in the schools, the devices needed to be connected online to play up these resources. It's a major one, and all those things require funding. Most of the time, education in Nigeria and Africa is focused on building classrooms, is focused on training teachers. Those are usually the top two priorities before they now come to tools. So it's a major one, and they don't currently have the funding. So a lot of what we are trying to do is one, more private participation. When I mean private participation, get a lot more organizations to support these initiatives. And we've seen, made headways with that. So for instance, right now I have a project being sponsored by, an oil company to go to public schools and take these tools and resources there. So by the end of July, we would have, trained like 500 children. Um, I also got a grant, I think that was last year, to do a similar thing. Take our devices, go to public schools, and expose the children to that. So a lot of that what has been happening. So I can imagine if there are quite a number of us that are doing that. So if I should step back, I would say we need to tell government, okay, you don't have the funds, but can you just do some policies that allow big organizations to part of their CSR project must be this. It needs to go beyond building classrooms. It needs to go to be able to provide some of these tools that the children can be exposed to, learning resources that are more modern, if I may use that word, and the internet. So maybe instead of the telecom providers, some of what those are some of the things they are saying. Can you ensure that part of your CSR is about providing internet connectivity to certain schools and in certain areas? Those are some of the things that we need to do a bit more of. To be fair to, I like to also be fair to government. They are trying to do a bit more advocacy. I have attended a number of these, advocacy sessions. The problem, of course, is that they are slow to implement it. But if they just implement one or two things that have to do with more with private participation, I feel we'll make a bit more headway. So a lot of the oil companies or the major companies try to get them to adopt schools where they are adopting them in terms of promoting technology. Because I keep saying it, if we are teaching children today, preparing them for the future, and we're not exposing them to technology, the use of technology tools, we're already creating handicap. And we see how fast the world is with technology tools. One moment we don't have chat GPT, the next thing we have chat GPT, and it's boom, it has changed the world. So imagine if you're raising children that don't even know how to use a computer, then you're really raising them with a major handicap. So we need to do a lot more advocacy. Even I, as a person and as a company, we intend to do a bit more in terms of pushing for government. But I also feel coming from an angle of private party participation would really help. So all the companies out there, these are some of the ways that you can help. Let's ensure that these children are being equipped with, technology skills, digital skills, creative thinking, rather than it being about building classrooms. The more you do that, the more you're preparing the workers of tomorrow, which is where a lot of companies are having challenges, getting employees. A lot of people are just not equipped with the skills they need for the workforce. I hope I've answered your question, Kazim.
Yes, so I'll just pass it on now to Sam.
Oh, thank you, Kazim. And really, really great and insightful bits of information from you, Titilope. And what I actually enjoyed is when you shared about the election game. And it reminds me of one of the books I read a long time ago called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was around financial literacy, but not taught from a university perspective, right? So you're making it very practical. Now, we started this show and have continued from a positive perspective. So we recognize that there are challenges in Africa and around the world. We never walk away from that. We can do 20 shows on that a day. So because we are about positive impact, what I want to try and get from yourself is, do you have any success stories or examples of how the work you've been doing, the games you've been producing, have positively impacted the lives of the African children around you or even beyond that?
Yeah. Okay, so I will start with some non-technology success stories. So like I mentioned earlier, the more you go to schools, you find out that all you really need to start with is some awareness and some education, because people still feel that, oh, this thing is not a must. So one of the things that we did in 2021 is that we organized a STEAM Fun Fest. A STEAM Fun Fest was simply like a conference that exposed the children to different aspects of science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. We got different speakers from different part of the world to speak to them. We got a child inventor from the US. We got one of the people that did the vaccine from Moderna. So as they spoke to the children's eyes and even their parents and the educators were like, okay, this is something I need to consider. The first event, we had 1,500 people online. Last year, we said to, let's make this thing physical. We rented a venue. We then got different, STEM exhibitors to come and allow the children to have hands-on experience with this thing. So we got people doing 3D. got people doing drone technology, got people doing robotics, science experiments, and the idea is all the same. You want them to touch these things. You want them to spark a light that allows the child go and do more, and realize that, oh my goodness, this thing can happen. The feedback we got was just mind blowing, because we also had the master classes and panel sessions where people from different, areas in technology came and spoke. So we had people from sorry about that, we had people from fintech, we had people from agrotech, health tech, and they just talked about, the careers and the space. And people's minds were blown, the children's minds were blown, their parents' minds were blown, the educators' minds were blown, and they realized that there's a lot that we need to be doing, and we got so much feedback from that. We initially wanted just like 2,500 people to show up for the event, but eventually 6,000 people showed up for the event. So it also shows that people are aware and they were curious. They wanted to know. A lot of people don't even know this noise you're making about technology and all those things about. So it was an eye opener for them. You know what came out of that event? The event was organized in one of those states in Nigeria, but people that attended that event went on to go and organize in their various states, because they're like, oh my God, we need this in my state. People are asking, come to my state and do the same. So it shows that what we need, which is similar to what you want to do with this show, is to, tell a different story, open people's eyes to see, and they realize that there are actually ways that you can learn about so many things, and people need to embrace, what's happening in the space. So that's one success story. The other success story is really with the games. People come back and say, wow, I've learned so many things that I wasn't aware, all because I played the games. We get feedback from parents when their children take part in any of our challenges in any of the games, with the same thing, that they were amazed what their children learned from playing a game. They were amazed at the number of hours and the dedication that the children put in the game. I remember a parent once telling me that her child was awake all night, and first in the morning, because he wanted to get to the top of the leaderboard. Every time he got to the top of the leaderboard, before he looked again, someone beat him to the top of the leaderboard. So, he woke up early in the morning to go and check. And that's really what you want. You want children to be excited about learning and learning anything. And so we take those games, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's about the elections, we're just showing people a different way to learn. One of the major thing, when we even look at the election in Nigeria, is to teach people not to be bought or not to sell their not to sell their vote. Those things we can't teach people through games, through another way that is fun. And what people are doing is they're playing this thing, and they're like subconsciously taking off a lot of those things. And those are some of the success stories that show that learning is not, you sit down in front of the classroom and then someone comes and talks to you about it, and most of the time you forget half of what it is. But learning can be done in various ways. Learning can be done using a lot of technology tools, of which games are part of it. And the idea is really to make it fun, to make it effortless, to make it memorable, to make sure that the children are engaged. And you can teach people anything. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is that we've also moved into corporates. We started with children, but a lot of corporates were like, oh, this is something that we can do. So we had a corporate that did an inter-school competition in their office. They broke people down into like little houses, and then the office, they were competing against each other. What came out of it was that the office, it brought new life to the office. People were competing, people were engaged, and the quick things was on their values. It wasn't, it was about them learning about their values, competing about knowing about the values of the organization and the history of the organization. So people were engaged. I'm like, no, my house is going to win. This is going to. In the end, the objectives were achieved. So it wasn't that we got people and brought them in a formal classroom. It's just that we helped them learn in a different way. So this is just some of the examples of, just some of the success stories of what has happened that keeps giving us satisfaction that yes, people can learn and do enjoy learning through, another means. Using technology, using games is, one of the ways that you can do it. Let me stop here. Unless you want to hear more stories.
Now we'll save it for part 4, 5, and 6.
Six. But okay, let me just add this. One of the things that we've also done now is also to go outside of Nigeria, as we talk with people. People are like, oh my goodness, this is a great idea. Can we also do this in our country? So one of the things that one of the partners, one of the corporates that we worked with challenged us is that, when are you going to take this thing outside Nigeria? And that was their challenge to us this year. So we did a first like a social awareness in March, and beyond Nigeria, we went to Ghana. Yes, Sam went to your city or your country. We went to Ghana, we went to South Africa, and went to Kenya. And the feedback is the same. It's like, wow, we didn't know we didn't know it could be like this, could be this engaging, could be this, this fun. So for us, we'll continue to push, continue to tell the story, continue to show that children can learn in a lot of fun ways, and using technology and gamification is just one of those. And even adults, let me add that. Adults as well.
Fabulous. And Kazim, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm pleased at the same time, right? I think Titilope answered the question that I could see coming, because we're quite telepathic, right? We can see from each other. So I was going to say, given that we are quite close to the time, do you want to get more into the wrap up and the build up to share that, there's definitely going to be 3, 4, and 5. This is a franchise, because I'm having fun learning from Titi. But Kazim, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to touch on with Titilope before we ease ourselves out?
Yes, exactly. I'm just going to ask one last question, which is, let's look into the future now, Titi. What do you
Mhm.
see as the biggest opportunity, or biggest opportunities, and some of the challenges in empowering African children through accessible and engaging learning tools such as the one from Niger Kids?
Okay. What are the opportunities? I think for me, the opportunities are endless. What that means is that children can learn anything. And the way the world is going, we are moving away from just it being pure maths and English to really be more about skills. So it's just the way, we have the popular Scratch, which is like a game type way of teaching children coding in its simplest form. I think that's really where we see anything going. So imagine, your child is trying to learn further maths, differentiation and integration, and then you have one interesting game that just breaks it down to them, and makes them learn it effortlessly. Or you're trying to promote, your culture, you're trying to promote something of, value, you're trying to promote citizenship, for instance, which is very key. We keep saying to Nigeria that Nigeria is made mainly of the youth. They're the ones that are going to determine the presidency going forward, and a lot of those parties. Imagine if we start building their values now, helping them to be good citizen, helping them to know more about the election process, how they can be involved, how to select, look at the manifestos of the president, a lot more things, a lot more education, things will be easier. So there's so much you can teach with games, or cybersecurity, which is going to increasingly become, a major one. So I see the trend being that everything can be gamified. People's attention spans are so short, so you will need more work in trying to keep them engaged. So that's where it is. What are the challenges? The challenges continue to remain if we don't have, um, widespread access. Then it seems as if it will only be a few that will have, that disadvantage. So I think for me, that's really, really the major challenge. How do we just, make this a level playing field? How do we have more access to the internet? How do we have more access to devices that allow the children to be able to do that. The process of teaching them is, easy. How do we also help their teachers? Because that's another thing with technology. So the students are far ahead, but teachers are behind. How do we also help the teachers come up to speed in terms of these various learning tools? So these are the challenges. Continue to take these challenges one day at a time. But I think the future is bright. That's what I would say. So we are better. We've made progress from where we are coming from. We are not where we should be, but I mean we've made progress.
Thank you. Uh,
Okay.
Kazim, I believe that's all we have time for at the moment. And Titilope, I'm going to leave you with something because when we introduce the show properly and we start broadcasting it, look out for this buzzword. I'd like to call it a friendly mosquito. I won't tell you what it is, but when we post it back to you, I would explain in that message. But Kazim, I'll let you have the last few words and to see us out.
Okay, thank you very much, Titi, and thank you, Sam. So I'd just like to say a very big thank you again to our guest, Titilope Adewusi, for joining us on the show today and for sharing your valuable insights on today's topic with our audience. And also to our listeners as well, we hope that you have enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. So do remember to comment, like, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. So until next time, so it's your hosts, Samuel Eskin, and myself, and our guest, our awesome, wonderful guest, Titi Lokweadusi, signing out, saying bye bye now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kazim.